Good evening. We are doing the Narad Bhakti Sutra. Now, today we are going to start from Sutra 28 onwards. If you recollect, yesterday we had done a number of sutras where different theories were put forward by different teachers. Now, all these, it was talking about the greatness of the love divine. So, there are three paths which we discussed: bhakti, karma, jnana, and disciplined yoga, and bhakti was supposed to be the topmost. And I think we were talking about why devotion is superior. So today we are going to give further discussions on why is this so. It has to be proved, isn't it? So let us see Sutra 28 from the Narad Bhakti Sutra. For the love divine, knowledge alone is the means, so says some Acharya. Now, there are some people in this world who believe that to even get to devotion, to even get to the path of devotion, you need to have knowledge. Why do you think it is important that you need to have knowledge? They say, if I have to know the divinity that I am talking about, at least I need to have a little knowledge about what I am looking at, isn't it? Knowledge is a way through which I can understand certain things. How do I understand devotion and love? If I don't know the subject. Now, this is their way of saying that it is important that I need to first have knowledge of this. In our world, if I have to look at the material worldly love, there are issues connected to this material worldly love which are qualified by means of age, the person that I am going to meet, who they are, what is the status in the society, so on and so forth. There's a whole load attached to the knowledge. If there is a young boy of say 24, 25 years of age, naturally he is going to look for a girl who is near about his age, plus or minus here and there. He is going to verify if it is an arranged kind of a marriage. The whole idea is to get somebody from the own category, their financial status, what part they are from of the country, what are their leanings, what is the different kind of social get-up that they have. All these have to be taken into consideration. That means I need to have knowledge. See, knowledge is required for all kinds of, say, activities. If I have to even appoint a judge or elect a president or a prime minister, I need to have the knowledge about that person, isn't it? So, acharyas, that means some great philosophers, scholars, their contention was if I have to go towards Krishna, I need to have knowledge who is this Krishna and whether he is worthy of my devotion or no. If I have to look at the different gods and the goddesses that are there has to be a kind of a comparison. A comparative study has to be done. And once I understand what is it that I am going to get from Krishna, that I can go towards him. See, these are theories. Please understand this. This is how people thought. And it is not that these people were not knowledgeable about devotion, but they have to put forward these theories just like any other person. See, if I have to ask a question, how are you? The simplest answer would be fine, thank you. But no, it has to be qualified. The question is, why are you asking me? Oh, is it because of the problems that are going on in this world? Why are you asking this question? Is because, if, but, all these things are going to come up. A straightforward yes, no answer never comes. Everything has to be detailed out. The greatest of the sage is, please understand, do not talk too much. You can understand, I talk too much, isn't it? So, so I cannot be qualified anywhere. So, jokes apart, the idea of knowledge only comes in because I have to understand and assess that person. Assessment is necessary. Why is assessment necessary? In our world, if we don't assess, like if I'm going to the market, I am going to buy, say, tomatoes or potatoes or something like that, and I'm going to go and check them out, each of them. I have to see that they are ripe enough, I have to see that they are good, and then I will buy, isn't it? So knowledge is important. So these sages who were there, I can't even call them sages, they are called acharyas, knowledge experts. So they had this idea that you better have knowledge to understand devotion. To be devoted to someone, you need to know the subject matter. Now, if you see, there are lots of great scholars, teachers, professors, politicians, you name it, very highly educated people. They always do assessment. And the assessment is done based on how that person can be considered greater than me. Think, if there is a Nobel Prize winner, would you think he can accept somebody who is not a Nobel Prize winner? It becomes extremely difficult because he will say, see, I have won the Nobel Prize in this, economics or some such subject. What does this guy know? That ahankara comes in. And assessment is always being done. So whom can I revere and whom can I praise or whom can I look up to? That person has to be greater than me. And this is the reason why everybody has this yardstick of theirs. I have been constantly, many a times I have been asked this question. Is Shiva greater or Vishnu is greater or Krishna is greater? Who is the greatest amongst all this? Who is the greatest? Please understand, if you have eyes for Shiva, you are only going to consider Shiva as the greatest. Even if I tell you that no, Krishna is the greatest, you are not going to accept it. You understand? If I am talking about the Indian Prime Minister and you are an Indian, and if I say, can I say the Pakistan Prime Minister is great? You know what you are going to say? No. The Indian Prime Minister is the greatest because you have eyes only for the Indian PM. And you will try your level best to prove it. But if you ask a Pakistani who is the greatest, he will say my Prime Minister is the greatest. It is everybody's individual yardstick. They judge each and every person. So human beings have this capacity of judging everything that they see. We did this yesterday and day before also. So knowledge for them has a much superiority. And for these people, you cannot tell them that, no, devotion is different, knowledge is different. They will never accept it. They will say, you see, it is written in this book and it is written here, and my master has taught me that this is the thing. Okay, if that is the one, if that is what your master has taught, you think I'm going to refute it? I'm not even going to bother my head, because if I'm a devotee of God, why should I even bother to refute anything? I'll say, okay, you are the greatest, come on, no problem. Because a devotee doesn't even bother his head about trying to prove anything. Please remember this. A devotee doesn't bother. Sutra 29 says they are mutually dependent, declare others. One is dependent on the other. What is dependent? Knowledge is dependent on devotion, and devotion is dependent on knowledge. Knowledge is dependent on devotion, do you know? Knowledge is dependent on devotion is a very strange subject. Again, why? Because you say, if you are not a devotee, how will you be knowledgeable? And there are others who will say, no, you have to be knowledgeable to be a devotee. So devotion is always a cut and a dry subject according to all the people who believe in knowledge. You see, they will always try to come up with theories. I will give you some understanding of this. Now, if I say devotion has to come on its own, the person will say, what are you saying? How does devotion come on its own? It doesn't come on its own. You need to qualify the sentence by something else. No. The next verse that we are going to do, the next sutra, talks about this only. So you cannot say that I first need to have the knowledge to come to devotion. And you cannot say that I need to have devotion and then I will come to knowledge. No, no way, no way. They are mutually independent of each other. But yet there are people who are saying they are dependent. You have to depend on each other. The sages from the past, they had the great idea of dissecting everything. They dissected God every single day. They had the great theory that, I am that I am. I'm sure some of you have heard about these theories, There are the Vedantists, Advaitists. They have their own way of looking at life. It's like, imagine, Vivekananda comes and sits in front of Ramakrishna Paramahansa and says, I don't believe in what you say. I have not seen God. And Ramakrishna Paramahansa says, but I have seen. What proof is there? Can you give me the proof? Who asked this question? The knowledgeable type will want to have the proof of the pudding. Proof of everything. I want to see, I want to touch, I want to feel, I want to experience. It's when I experience only I will understand. Otherwise, I am not even interested in your theories. Your devotion you can keep to yourself. So, some of them said that it is mutually dependent on each other. It is not just one-way story, it's a two-way street, one way, this way. So 29th sutra says it is mutually dependent. The next sutra, which is number 30, says, Bhakti is its own fruit. Thus says the son of Brahma, the creator. Brahmaji, if you remember, had children, and they were called children born of the mind. Okay, they were not with sexual union or anything like that. They were born of the mind. So he had the first 4 children. They are the Sanat Kumars, Sanatan, and so on and so forth. Now these 4 guys, they were intellectual, very, but there is a story where they have gone and asked their father, We want to know about Krishna. And those who are doing the Uddhav Gita with me will remember this episode where the four sons of Brahma, they go to their father and they say, Dad, can you please tell us about this? And Dad says, I myself don't know anything about it. What are you saying? Let us go and ask Krishna. So Krishna comes over there and gives them a fantastic answer. And there is an entire chapter based on this answer which you can go and see. There are those satsangs are available online. They are there in YouTube. They are there in podcasts. Various podcasts are there. If you want to go to Facebook page of Krishna Knows, it is there, and even Twitter. And these are there. So if you go and say, type over there Uddhav Gita, Krishna Knows, you will get. There is a full episode of that. It tells you exactly how this whole thing transpired. So taking a cue from there, we are saying this verse. Alright. I'm not going to explain that. So if you want to know that, you go over there and search it out and you will get it. Okay. If you don't have YouTube and all, you can go to podcasts. There are so many podcasts of Krishna Knows everywhere. You can go and log in and download also. So, Brahmaji, his sons say, the bhakti is its own fruit. What is this bhakti is its own fruit? Bhakti comes on its own, by the way. It is like, suppose if I plant a mango, mango seed, I am going to get a mango tree, isn't it? So if I plant a particular kind of a seed, I am going to get that only. So he says, if you want bhakti, you got to plant bhakti first. Where do I get the seed from? The seed comes from your previous life, by the way. The seed is already sown over there. It has developed into a fruit and the fruit has fallen and the seed is there. These are called your past knowledge which gets transferred to this life and then the next and then the next. It is like this, suppose the idea is that if you can get realized in this life, fantastic. But if you don't get realized, so wherever you have put that comma, you can start from that sentence again. Or maybe a full stop. In your last life, you might have put full stop somewhere in the knowledge or in that particular bhakti place. You can start from there again. Alright. So that is the reason why the seed is bhakti itself. And when I have bhakti, bhakti is going to grow, which means devotion is the seed of itself. Where does devotion come from? So now we have done 3 separate sentences. The first one says, knowledge is required. Second one says, mutually dependent. You have to have knowledge. Knowledge gives devotion. Devotion gives knowledge. Now the third one says, the devotion comes on its own. Now this is qualified by the sentence given by Brahmaji and his sons. Okay. Why have they given this sentence? Because Krishna himself has taught them. This is what it means. So, bhakti, devotion, is its own fruit. There is a very beautiful example of this in Ramakrishna Paramahansa's life. Now, Ramakrishna Paramahansa had a devotee. His name was Latu Maharaj. This Latu Maharaj was a simpleton. So simple that he was not even an educated person. And because he was not educated, he was literally working like a servant in one place. He was serving a master. He came to know about Ramakrishna Paramahansa, so he tells his master, Master, see, I want to go and meet Ramakrishna ji. So his master, is thinking that he's a simpleton, what can you say to a simpleton? He says, okay, go. So Latu Maharaj comes walking all the way from Kolkata. It's a long distance, by the way. He came walking all the way to the temple, Dakshineshwar temple, and he met Ramakrishna ji. And the moment he saw him, the dam burst and he became one of the greatest devotees of Ramakrishna ji. Ramakrishna Paramahansa would talk a lot of things during his satsangs. He was one of the greatest saints of the last century, and naturally he would be doing satsangs. So there would be people sitting in front of him, all great luminaires from Calcutta and Dhaka and all those places. They would come, they would sit in front of him, and Ramakrishna Paramahansa would talk on esoteric subjects. This Latu Maharaj, he hardly understood anything because he was not an educated person. And if he was told something, go do this, he would do that. During that time, he would stay in the temple with Ramakrishna ji. He would look after Sharda Ma also. She was staying in the Nabat next door. So what he would do, he would be taking care of Ramakrishna ji and Sharda Ma so nicely that even if Ramakrishna ji would want to go for relieving himself or in the jungles, there was a nearby grove where he would go. No, there was no Modi ji at that time to say, we can have to build toilets. There were no toilets at that time. Okay, sorry. Stupid joke. But understand, so you had to go to the jungle and you carried one small tumbler of water so that Ramakrishna ji is not inconvenienced. Latu Maharaj would carry that tumbler with him. I mean, who carries it? This is devotion of the highest kind, let me tell you this much. Devotion of what level? When he was asked certain question, he said, I don't understand what Ramakrishna ji is saying or what any of you are saying. I just am in love. I am a devotee of Ramakrishna ji and Ma, and I don't understand anything. I don't even want to know. After the passing away of Ramakrishna ji, he was very upset because now he had nowhere to go. And he couldn't understand Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda also. Swami Vivekananda was at that time, previously he was Narendra, and later on he became Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda changed to Vivekananda. Latu Maharaj was given a name, Adbhutananda, because he was a very strange guy. Adbhut, strange guy. Most of the time he was lost in his own world and he would be doing the simplest of the jobs. You tell him anything, he will do that. Go tend to the garden, he will do that. Go bring this, he will get that. So he was like that. He was like a general dog's body, we call it. No, doing anything. One day he couldn't understand what Vivekananda was saying and he got so upset that he just walked out of that place because most of the time he couldn't understand what was going on around. And in his state, he walked all over the town. He came to the place where Sharda Ma was staying. And when he came to that house, he saw her in tattered sari sitting outside. Actually, funnily, the story has started in the middle only. I keep stories in the end, but maybe I think you all are lucky you're getting 2-3 stories now. So, Latu Maharaj is called Adbhutananda. He looks at her and he says, oh my God, mother is not even having good clothes. Now this man had not even a single penny on himself. He himself was dressed in rags. So he said, let me get some money from somewhere. Oh, where do you get the money from? So he said, I will go to the town, the nearby village or town, whatever, and I will work over there like a, person who will carry stuff. You have these assistants in stores and all, carrying big brown bags and all, gunny bags and all. And he became a helper in one place, and at the end of the day, the money that he got, he went and purchased a nice sari which he could afford with that money. And he went and gave it to Ma, Sharda Ma. This is the simplicity of devotion, let me tell you. It doesn't require knowledge at all. Knowledge is not required in such circumstances. So devotion is a subject which is by itself its own seed. You don't need anything to qualify devotion. You may be the most uneducated person on earth. You may not even know the Vedas, the Shastras. You don't even know Sanskrit. You don't even know anything about any god whatsoever. You don't even know what is a mantra. You don't know anything. It really doesn't matter. To be in love, to be a devotee of the Lord, there is no requirement. So this is the third sentence which the four Kumaras have said. And Narada is telling us this. So, we move to the next verse. Sutra 31 says, now there is an example over here. Because it is seen, demonstrated as such in the examples of palace and dinner, etc. Now he is coming up with examples for you to understand the simplicity of it all. First you have to give some examples. So Narada is saying, it can be demonstrated by the examples of palace and the dinner, etc. So this is two examples he is given. Now why palace? In ancient time there were kings and queens. Now, do you need a palace to be a king? You see, if you are a king or a queen, you need a palace. It's an understood issue, isn't it? I mean, think about it. Can you be a king without a palace? You cannot. So it is like one is qualifying the other. You have a palace, you have a king. Sometimes the palace is without a king also. Yes, of course. Nowadays it has become all palaces have become nearly like museums. You can go and see all the fancy stuff over there. But in olden times, the palaces actually had kings. So there are palaces and there are kings. Now, how many rooms do they have? How big is the palace? Do they have a throne room? Do they have a bedroom? Do they have a big hall? It's an understood fact, isn't it? A palace is supposed to have all these things. You see, if you have some 16,000 wives, no, you need 16,000 rooms also. Maybe that many number of palaces also. I mean, Krishna, I don't know how he managed it, but he must have managed somehow. I don't know how it is done today. So suppose you have a king who has got, say, 20 wives. There is a king. And he has got 20 wives. He has taken a 5-star hotel and he's staying over there because if coronavirus, he has to get, so, social distancing. So he's distanced himself with 20 wives of his. So it is an understood fact that a palace needs to have rooms, and the rooms have to be decorated, they have to be embellished, they have to have gold, silver, this, that, all. It's an understood fact. A king is supposed to be rich. Okay, He's not a poor fellow. He's not staying in one jhopadi. Jhopadi means a hut. Okay. He is not even staying in one small one-room apartment or something like that. No, he's not. The fellow is great. He has to stay in a big palace. So it's an understood. Now you go for dinner. He's giving an example of dinner. So, dinner. Now, can I have dinner only with water? A dinner has to be a full meal. Okay. Can I have a snack? No. A dinner has to be complete, isn't it? I mean, those who understand dinner, dinner means food, right? And food means water also, drinks also, this also, that also. Now in India, you may have rice and all the sambar and rice and this and that and chapatis and puris and God knows all those kind of things. It's a full meal. Can I say dinner can be only one stuff? Yeah, some poor people in India may eat only rice, I was telling somebody, in the past, when there was no money around, people would eat kanji. Kanji means, what? The starch, the starch which comes on rice. People would have just kanji. But they also needed a little bit of pickle or something to go with it. Maybe even a farmer who is a poor farmer in India, if he has those rotis or chapatis or whatever, bhakri we call it, he will eat it with one chili or one onion or some little stuff. He is just not going to have it only that. So, a meal, a dinner is a qualified thing. You have to understand, if I call you for dinner and if I give you just one kanji, you understand kanji now, huh? Starch, rice and starch in it, you're going to look at me and say, what? You called me for this? I want a full meal, right? So it is like that. So these two examples Narada has given. He says palace and this. And then he says in comparison, okay, what he says, Sutra 32, he says, because of it, a mere knowledge alone, neither the favor of the king nor the appeasement of hunger can ever happen. If you don't know the king, you cannot enter the palace. Is it understood or no? Yeah, you may know some havaldar over there, some small soldier over there, and you can sneak inside and you can see the palace. That is a different story. But if you know the king or the prince, then you can see the palace. So he says, just saying that there is a king and there is a palace doesn't say anything. So you have to have the king and the palace. The palace has to have its rooms. They have to be nicely decorated. There has to be a throne room. Everything is understood. It is called knowledge. And for dinner, he says, is it important not to have hunger? See, if you are hungry, then you are going to have dinner. Isn't it? Dinner means supper or it means even lunch. Okay, so just the word dinner is given. Doesn't mean dinner itself. It can mean anything. You are anyway going to have. So when you are eating dinner, it means you are hungry. And if you are hungry, you better eat quite a lot, isn't it? Quite a lot means sufficient enough. Doesn't mean stuffing yourself, it means sufficient enough. So this is an example which is given. So, Sutra 33 says, therefore that supreme love for God alone is to be sought after by seekers of complete liberation. So now, after listening to these three arguments, what are the three arguments? You want me to remind you? There are three arguments which he had done. The first one is knowledge. Some Pandits say that you require knowledge to understand devotion. The second type of people say, no, they have to be mutually dependent on each other. So one should have this and that should have this, both. The third one says, no, devotion is qualified by the word devotion. All three are right from their perspective. But these are three arguments put forward for you to understand. So, in this verse 33, he says, therefore, that supreme love for God alone is to be sought after by seekers of complete liberation. Those who are interested in liberation. If you don't know the God, how will you liberate yourself? Doesn't that tell you something very clearly? That you better have love for God first. Right? Self-realization, liberation, reaching the ultimate goal. Who is giving it to you? The Lord only is giving it to you. And if you don't know Him, if you don't love Him, how will you reach there? You see, in this world there are mercenaries. You know mercenaries? And they fight for some country or some group. Why? Because they have love for money. But there are soldiers of that country who fight for their country because of the love for their country. Isn't it? When you love your country, you will fight for it. When you love someone, are you not going to fight for it? But if you have nothing to fall back on, you have to have something to think about, isn't it? You got to love something. You got to understand that thing. Then only you will go to that place called liberation. The idea which is given by most of the people, those who are on the followers of what is called as the Brahmo Samaj or the Brahmanyanis or Brahma Vidya and all these kind of fancy stuff that they teach. What do they say? The Advaitis, the Vedantis, what do they say? Liberation, self-realization, that by itself I have to go there. So I am going to do yoga, I am going to do this and I am going to do that. How is a person supposed to do that? There is a word which is very, very important, which we will do in the next chapter. You understand? Those who are devotees will understand that word like this. I don't even have to utter the word. It is called grace of God. You understand? He got to bless you first. So simplest answer is the big boss upstairs, Supreme Divine Consciousness, Krishna, Father in heaven. If he doesn't bless you, how are you ever going to reach that liberation also? Nobody understands. So if you have to go to liberation, you better know that there has to be love for God. So he says the supreme love for God alone is to be sought after by seekers of complete liberation. If you want to become a Brahmanyani, you want to be released from this world also, by going through whichever path that you wish to go through. Remember the three paths that we discussed yesterday? The first one was of knowledge, second one was Karma Yoga, and the third one was the path of Raj Yoga. So these three yogas, you want to go to which destination you are looking for? The destination is called liberation. The destination is called realization. The destination is called knowing the self. All these called destinations. You have to reach that point. You have to go towards nothingness. If you are a Buddhist, you will say, I want to go towards Shunyata. I want to become the Buddha. In the Buddhist temples also, whom are you going and seeing? You know, it is an atheistic religion. They don't believe in all God and all that kind of stuff. But you go to any temple which is teaching you Buddhism, you will find some fancy statue of Buddha over there. There is a religion which says idolatry is not correct. Idolatry, you should not idolize anything. And what do they have? The image of their God. How can you say idolatry is not right and have the image of your own God? Christianity teaches you that. But you go to any church, you will find there's a very big cross over there with Jesus on it. Sometimes there is a Mother Mary, sometimes there is the infant Jesus, sometimes there is Saint Joseph, and here you are not supposed to pray to idols. Are they not idols? What do you think they are? You please know this. If you do not know the destination, you cannot reach it. What is the destination? When Jesus said, Father in heaven is the destination, I am the doorway to that. So you go through me and you will reach there. It's in the same way, we need to have the destination fixed in our mind also. Atheism and all that I am not even bothered about just now. We are discussing only about devotees. And we are discussing about people who are looking for liberation. I want mukti. In the Purusharth, the fourth one is mukti. I want mukti. I don't want to be born again. Sir, whom are you asking that question? I don't want to be born again. Somebody has to sanction it, no? If you want admission in some college, you have to get some sanction. If you want to get, say, entry into some airport also, you need the stamp. Right? TSA, I don't know. What do they call it? You have to go and get a big stamp over that. Okay, sanction, you can cross over. But if you don't get a cross and don't get a stamp, you can't. Then you have to go back. Why? So there is an authority there. So for anything, any liberation, realization, whatever you talk about, there is a final authority. Can I stand in front of the immigration officer and I say, who the hell do you think you are? You don't know me. You can't do that. That fellow will say, throw that fellow out. Isn't it? You can't go and show your ego over there. Isn't true? And you can't go and tell the principal, I got 95% marks. Who do you think you are? I can get admission in your college. You can't talk like that also. The principal will say, I'm very sorry, I can't give you admission here. He is allowed. He is the boss. If the boss is allowed, you can't do anything. If the boss says, throw that fellow out, can you do anything about it? They have this understanding. You want to grow, you want to reach your destination, you better be nice. Okay? So in your destination called liberation, realization, whatever that you are thinking of, you better have bhakti as the basis of everything. Alright? So he says, therefore, that supreme love for God alone is to be sought after by seekers of complete liberation. Those who seek liberation should always have this in mind, that you should have bhakti, devotion, supreme love for God. Then you will be able to achieve. Otherwise, the doorway is closed. Self-realization is a subject. When you want to know the self, who is the self? So you do all your elimination rounds, You start removing, neti. Finally, you come to a point that the self is in me. Okay, like that. Come to that. The self is in me, the self is in him, the self is in her, the self is in everything. Who is the self? Yourself, myself, thyself, all self. Where the self you are saying. What is this self? You are just a minuscule particle in that big self that you talk about. So there must be somebody who is the super boss of self, no? He is the capital SELF. You are just one small SELF. So you better know the capital SELF, right? Yesterday we had a serious talk on when people do meditation. Even when you are doing meditation, what are you meditating on? Nothingness. I am meditating on nothing. Is there anything called nothing? I mean, just think about it. If there is nothing, there is nothing. There has to be something to meditate on. Otherwise, the mind which is full of nonsense, your mind is full of nonsense. It clings to everything, this thing, that thing, that thing, that thing. It better have something to think of. If you are thinking just now, oh, I need a soft drink, I need a soft drink, I need a soft drink, you better get a soft drink. Are you thinking about it, isn't it? I am thirsty. I have to. The moment the word thirsty comes into play, you will want at least a soft drink or, water or something which will quench your thirst. That means at least you're thinking of something. When people meditate on nothing, what are they doing? Yeah, there will be a lot of people who will want to trash me just now and say, you don't understand nothing. I agree with you. I never understood nothing. That is why when people ask me, what is your name? I said, nobody. Nobody means what? I don't have anybody to think of. Who are you? Biggest question, who are you? The answer was, I am nobody. So when I have to translate it, I say, only God knows the answer. That is why Krishna knows, God knows the answer. Nobody knows. But that nobody is God, no. That is why the word Krishna came in front. So did you understand this? I can't say nobody. Nothing also I can't say. My name is nothing. Who are you? Nobody. I can't call myself nobody. So Guruji, nobody. That is funny. But Guruji, somebody. So Krishna Guruji, very good. I am happy with it. At least you call me by something. So something is important. And catching hold of that something is so very important. And that something is called the supreme love for God. It cannot be mean, cannot be time pass, it cannot be, oh, I just have, when I reach my destination, I don't need it. It is not just like that, you have to have it, even when you reach your destination. Because even that nothing is controlled by him only. Those who have done the Bhagavad Gita know me very well. In that I have clearly defined what is this nothing. Nothing is called the first divine unmanifest. First divine unmanifest. That means you are a manifest being. You are a manifest being. When you are manifest, after you die, where are you? Don't know. Okay. So you have become unmanifest. So did you get this point? So first divine unmanifest is nothing. Cannot be defined. Krishna's domain is called the second divine unmanifest. Beyond the first divine unmanifest, there is a second divine unmanifest. And I, Krishna says, am the person over there. I am the supreme person over there. And my second divine unmanifest is also my abode. When I say abode, it means a place. Correct? And when he says I am a supreme person, does it not tell you that he is a person also? He is a person also. So if Krishna is the supreme divine unmanifest, second unmanifest, so he is a person and an abode. Both these things combined together. That is why, so that we do not have that disturbance in our mind, we call it Supreme Divine Consciousness. I just know He is there. That's it, period. So, the love for that has to be there. If I have to get the entry into the first divine unmanifest, which means if I want to get liberated, I want to reach self-realization, I want to reach that particular place where I become nothing, I got to have the permission of the super boss also. I can only get his permission if I am in love with him. Okay? So, this was understood by some of the greatest saints of all times. So, we have come to the end of this particular episode. Next time we are going to do 34 to 37.